Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. In today's interview, it's really a fun one. I'm going to speak with Chrishella Roché, the founder of VIBEZ Creative Art Space, which is a studio designed to help you explore your creative side through events and experiences catering to all ages. I think you're going to love this interview. There's lots in here to enjoy. I start off, though, by asking Chrishella why she decided to start her business.
I really like just having something for myself. Of course, people think of the perks of like not having to work for somebody else or just having more free time. You do, but you don't because the time once you become an entrepreneur, your brain is pretty much like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. You get inspiration from everywhere. I really like the idea of working for myself, employing other people, and being creative. As I look back, I've always been someone who's wanted to try something new, like sell jewelry or make jewelry and just selling things and buying things and making things that other people like. I made like a purse and someone wanted to buy it. And I'm like, what? This little thing? Sure. I didn't know anything about it. Like, okay, how do you charge for this or something? So I was just like, whatever your heart desires. And then I made myself another one. And I was like, oh, people actually like what I do here. Maybe there's like some more in this creative aspect of me. And that's kind of how I thought about being an entrepreneur. And then further down the line, I pursued it.
I just liked having a little bit more for myself. I think that's really fun, what Chrishella says there. How many of us can identify that? We wanted something for ourselves that we could really identify with, that we could really own. So I think that part is super inspiring. But then she goes on here. What happens with the next thing? We start getting into it as an entrepreneur. And you know what happens? Shiny object syndrome. We start chasing everything. Everything seems exciting. Everything we're capable of doing needs to be the next great thing we're doing. You know what? Here's what I like, the angle where she made her twist. It wasn't that she kept making like, I need to make purses. Someone bought one of my purses. What she identified was that core beneath it. Sometimes we need to ask ourselves why a few more times. Why is that cool? Why it's exciting? And she identified it was the creative aspect that she got most fired up about. And that's really where she ended up focusing her business. So one of the big challenges you may be facing, you may be feeling like I can do all these things. I'm so capable. The question is, and the spot where we focus all the time at Milwaukee Business Coach with our clients, how do you dial that down and how do you find the best, the most important one or two things that you should focus your energy on? Where are all your pieces coming together? How you're designed, what your experiences are, what your exposure are, what your placement is currently in the marketplace to be able to grow and succeed in that space. I think that's super cool. Well, Chrishella goes on to share a little bit more about the nuts and bolts as she's going into her business and how to get started in VIBEZ Created Art Space. Let's listen to what she says.
I didn't really know much about being a business owner or entrepreneur. So I looked into resources, local resources. The first business class I took was with WIBIC. It was Start, Run, and Grow Your Business. And they kind of helped me put my ideas, like the things that I had in my head, on paper and make sense of it. And then I went through BizStarts and did some coaching through there and like brainstorming and all of those things. And then at that point, I was ready to combine the information that I got from WIBIC and the information that I got from BizStarts and my coaches and actively pursue having a space for vibes.
A lot of times there are more resources out there and available for us than many of us think possible. Many entrepreneurs take advantage of them, but take advantage of them sometimes as an excuse to, I'm going to keep learning until I'm ready to go. Anyone who's worked with me for any period of time knows that I'm sort of well known for saying, no, I think you got enough to go. It's time to get off the diving board, jump off the high dive, and we'll find out how cold the water is in a second. Okay. Where Chrishella really latches on is she did these as a springboard, literally, to be able to move forward and advance her business. There are lots of free resources, and I encourage people to check them out. She mentioned WIBIC. She mentioned BizStarts. Small business development centers are another great resource to be able to help us move forward. Usually those give us that starting foundation. The question is, Are we ready to take whatever resources are out there? Maybe it's a seminar, maybe it's an opportunity, maybe it's a workshop, maybe it's a consultation. Are we willing to accept resources to be able to move forward rather than as an excuse to stay stuck? Something to think about. I went on to ask Chrishella as she's growing her business, talk to us about the process she took in order to bring more staff on board. I know that's a spot so many businesses struggle with. When do I bring them on board? How many should I have? How do I handle it when I've got them there? Let's hear what she says.
In the beginning, it was people who believed in my vision. So a lot of my family and friends donated their time, which I greatly appreciate. And then I wanted to bring on some employees, and factoring that into like your daily numbers was super important because I was worried. Like, I don't want to hire someone and not be able to pay them
Yeah.
because that would be bad. So I crunched the numbers. So initially, I was like, okay, well, what is something that I can realistically do? And I said, okay, well, what is the minimum wage? I know that's not a lot, but at the time, that's what I knew I could do. So I did minimum wage, factor that into like how much I need to make per day in order to like meet the basics, which is like rent, utilities, and employees. And then went from there. I found a program through the Milwaukee Urban League called Transform Milwaukee Jobs, where they will allow people to work for you as long as you train them in the areas that you need, and they will pay up to minimum wage. So that allowed me to do minimum wage plus whatever the amount that I wanted to add to paying them. So essentially, I could pay like $10 or $12 an hour. But without that program, I would have not been able to do that. And then after a year of them working with you, you can bring them on as an employee for yourself, not through the program, but you basically get 6 months to a year of training that the program will pay for. And then you can bring them on as an employee through your payroll, which was very helpful. And there are programs like that throughout the city of Milwaukee, which is really awesome.
Are you catching the theme that Chrishella is constantly finding opportunities around here to be able to help her business grow? Savvy business owners figure out how to take what they have and turn it into more. In this case, when she was talking about employees, she was talking about she had the opportunity to have someone subsidize up to minimum wage, allowing her to add additional portion to get closer to a desirable wage point where she could bring on employees to be able to get started and get moving. Go back and check that out if you didn't hear that. There may be other opportunities depending on what you're looking for that can help you along the road. Keep an eye out and then figure out how to use them to your advantage. But there's some words that were just like sweet music to my ears that I heard. I stopped to crunch the numbers. Are you kidding me? The number of business owners that say that to me is way too small. When I hear that, I absolutely love it. What she's talking about, she started to figure out one of her break-even points. I particularly think there are 3 different break-even points. We're not going to get into them here, but she calculated one to make sure the lights are going to stay on. Rent is paid. Utilities are going on, and then her employees get paid. So essential as we're getting launched. There's some pieces we got to figure out. You have to count the costs before you get going. You have to find out how much do I need to sell. It's going to help you in terms of how you want to price your products, how you want to position your products and services. Super important and something that I want everyone to pause and take some time to do. If we understand how our business functions, how the operations impact our numbers, we can really figure it out, not just with hiring decisions, but in so many different decisions that we make. It's one of the core pieces that Milwaukee Business Coach we want to work with businesses to do, crunch those numbers, understand them, not just for the sake of having wonderful numbers to be able to give to our tax accountants, but because it can help inform our operations to make better operational choices. So at the end of the day, we can turn a lot of your hard work into hard cash. Regular listeners to this podcast will have a really good idea of what I ask Chrishella next. Talk to me about customer discovery. How did you find out what your customers are going to want to make sure you're offering them the services and products that they're really interested in? Let's listen.
I was looking for space to paint and just enjoy my space and my time out. I fell into the problem of being either the only person of color or the only Black person. sometimes the only younger person. And so I would feel uncomfortable because I would like, okay, is this a space where I'm welcomed or am I just tolerated? And so it was a problem for me. And then speaking to other people, just kind of like sharing my thought of what I wanted to do. Other people were like, yeah, like it does take a while. If I want to experience like a paint and sip type of experience, I have to drive like 20, 30 minutes to get there. So at the time, I was trying to find something more within the city limits of Milwaukee. And people people enjoyed it. People flocked to it. It proved itself. I wasn't really sure because I was like, maybe I'm an anomaly, like maybe I'm an outlier and this has only affected me, but people ended up coming in. But it did take some like market research, figuring out like, okay, how many people within a certain age range or demographic um like live in the area, how many people are from like actually from Milwaukee and live in the area, how many people have kids and would bring their kids, to a space like this. So it took some research and then just talking like boots on the ground, talking to people, seeing what people were interested in. There are so many different outlets like polls on your Facebook stories or Instagram stories, just kind of seeing what people, were interested in and what they wanted.
You can tell I get excited about asking this question around customer discovery. And I love what Chrishella has to say here. There's so much focus on understanding what is first, there's some demographic information, some other research she's finding about different areas of the city, but she's out there with, she said, that boots on the ground, talking to potential customers, finding out what people are into, what they like, what they might be interested in, what they're already buying. Where are places and that people are already spending their money? Because we can learn about people's desires and behaviors and habits and interests and attitudes and the things that we need to know in order to be successful. Take a listen to our channel from previous episodes and find a variety of ways that people answer this question. The key is not that there's one way to get it done, but that it has to be done. It is so essential for us in order to be successful as we grow, as we launch new products, as we launch new innovations. It speeds up the process. It doesn't mean you can't be successful, but it does mean that you can step in some pretty giant piles of mess when you haven't done any of this homework in advance. The goal here is to accelerate our success so that we're doing it in a way that's really effective. You just really must do it if you're going to end up having the success that you want to achieve. If you're struggling with this or want to find out more information around the customer discovery, do reach out to us at mkebusinesscoach.com. So I go on to talk about challenges that Chrishella is facing as she's launching and growing and establishing her business. Let's listen to her story.
Financing was like the biggest thing. You think you're like, oh, I've saved up some money and I have a quite a nice amount, but that money goes so fast. So you have to look for financing or loans or grants or something of that nature to kind of help. But being a new business, it wasn't really open for like the banks. They look for some time given, maybe like 2 years at minimum before they'll even consider you. And so we did some crowdfunding in the beginning, and that kind of helped us out.
A lot of us have walked this path, financing, getting access to capital. One of the key challenges, not necessarily getting started all the time, but frequently in terms of growing, getting more established and becoming more successful. Perhaps you're walking in those shoes right now. She talked about a variety of options. Bootstrapping is one of them. Those are using your own resources in order to make it work. We've got traditional lending, which is going to the bank. And as she mentioned, a lot of times you need more business experience. And particularly if you're growing fast, the bank tends to be looking backwards. And you have to have certain conditions and collateral in order to support some of the forward growth, which may be more expansive than what a lender is willing to undertake. There's a whole variety of reasons that you could have challenges there. And then finally, there's investor financing. And these aren't the only three options that we have, but investors are willing to take an ownership position in your business or maybe require some of the first profits that come out in order to fulfill that obligation. You have a set of options. I think the first key is to make sure, is your budget scaled for what your access to capital looks like? Many, many businesses can launch on the money and accesses and resources they have available, but they focus on a number that's not necessarily attainable and frankly, oftentimes not really needed. I don't recommend a lot of times early that people go on with investors, except depending on the type of business. But one of the challenges is all of a sudden you're taking another person who gets to provide input and focus and sometimes managerial direction into your dream and your business. It is a significant decision that isn't always easy to do. One option we haven't discussed is also friends and family. That's going around and literally asking friends and family. Usually I prefer in the form of a loan. Sometimes it's equity, but in the form of a loan to say, hey, help me with some of the startup capital I can get you repaid. And then I recommend with friends and family, you dig out of that as fast as possible because Thanksgiving dinner just does not taste the same when you're having with people you owe money to than we're just having it with loved ones. All right. As Chrishella continued to grow her business, she faced another significant decision. When is it time to go into this full time and move it to become her primary focus and primary venture? Let's listen to how she tackles that challenge.
So initially, when I first started, I had a job. I was working at a nonprofit. And after about, I will say maybe almost a year of working the nonprofit and working the business, I decided that it was time for me to do the business full time. It was a very tough decision because I had to figure out, like, okay, at the time, I was not paying myself, and I don't recommend that. Absolutely figure out a way to pay yourself. But in the beginning, I was not paying myself, but knowing that I had a job elsewhere kind of made it easier for me to make sure all of the money went towards paying other people and making sure the business stayed up. Um, Once I made the decision to work full time in my business, I had to make sure that I was able to pay myself an hourly wage as I would pay anybody else.
Absolutely, Chrishella. We absolutely need to figure out a way to pay ourselves. Earlier in this episode, I talked about 3 levels of break even. One of them is when we make sure we're covering our basic utilities and rent and enough to keep the operation going. But an essential one becomes we have to be able to pay ourselves. If we're going to get into this and turn it into more than a hobby, we have to be able to make the step forward in order to get ourselves paid. There's a variety of ways to do that. And yes, I understand many times when we initially launch our business, there's going to be a stretch where there may be a stretch where we're not even getting revenue in the door yet. We're out there prospecting, getting people to understand what we do. Maybe our cycle is really long on what it takes to close a sale. But in that medium term to certainly long run, we have to be able to turn the business into something that pays ourselves, or it won't be sustaining, or it'll just remain a hobby, or it'll just be one of those 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week. But those businesses tend to dwindle and eventually fade away because ultimately they're not making enough money. One of the last comments that Chrishella made is she had to figure out an hourly wage that would work for herself. This is the place that I encourage so many entrepreneurs, even if they decide not to pay themselves in the beginning, they need to calculate what that cost is. You need it for 2 reasons. One, you need it because you would like to get paid. So what is the minimum amount per hour you're willing to do this work for? And figure that out. Because if you need to continue to grow and scale your business and you're not the one providing the service, you're going to have to hire someone to take that on. If the price you're charging or the way you're running the business does not allow you to pay someone else, now we have a really limiting factor in how things work. I can't tell you the number of business owners that I've worked with. When we do all the math and work it out, they find out they're being paid $4.27 an hour. It's a little bit demoralizing. They knew there wasn't enough money showing up in the bank, but this is one of the key reasons why. There are ways that we can structure your business in order to be successful. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. This is something where we can really provide some key guidance, and we're here to help. All right, I asked Chrishella about her support network. At MKE Business Coach, we often call this our trusted support. It's essential to have people to support us. It's one of the reasons I started the Entrepreneur Encounters channel, so that you can actually see that people reach out to all sorts of resources and you can start to mingle, even virtually, with others who are a little bit farther along with us in their journey. Let's hear how her support shapes up.
So my family, friends, I'm part of a sorority, and some of my fraternity brothers, like they helped out a whole lot with just getting things in order as far as like looks and getting like I won't say knocking on doors, but passing out flyers and posting them up around the city, taking the information to different events. Like if I'm not able to go, they will go on my behalf, which is really awesome to have a support system like that. But then also I have friends that are like, okay, I love what you are doing, but you gotta slow down. What have you done for yourself lately? Like, what have you done to make sure that you are okay mentally and physically? You're just running. You gotta take a break. So I love that I have family and friends like that. And they've been here since the beginning. And then as far as like networking goes, I would go to all of the young professional networking events. And then I also like sharing my story, like how I got started. So I would go to events just to like meet new people. And I think because I like speaking, it was easier for people to speak with me or listen to me or ask questions. And that's how I got to meet a lot of people and showcase my business. I would go to different like vendor events.
I love this. We all need trusted support on our side. Did you notice Chrishella had different people to help with different needs? Some of the women from her sorority were able to help her, give her some tactical business support. She also got some emotional support through friends and family. There's a variety of ways that we need support. The key is that we all have to be willing to find support. This is not a burden that's fun to do alone. Oftentimes, it's frankly not even possible to do alone. So whatever you need to do, start building the circles of success. Great coaches and consultants can be part of that success. There are other groups that you can join to have success. And honestly, just go out and start talking to entrepreneurs. There are so many people who love talking about their business that I think you'll be amazed in what people are willing to share, both sharing their struggles and concerns, sharing their successes, and sharing insights that are going to be really helpful for you. Well, like you, I can't do this on my own. I'd like to give a special thanks to Chris Crane, who did all our music for both the intro and outro, and especially to my wife, Kate, who does all the editing to make these episodes you're listening to possible. If you like what you hear, I want to encourage you to please like, share, subscribe, and comment. So again, thank you for joining me on this episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. I'm Brent Halfwasson, Milwaukee Small Business Coach, and I want to invite Chris to take us out.
Ready to take